No, that was ridiculous. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard. I've never heard of anything more ludicrous. Crazy rumor going around about them.
Aretha Franklin once snapped, leaving no doubt that even the Queen of Soul had a list of enemies. Behind the powerhouse voice and regal presence was a woman who never held back when it came to calling out phonies, copycats, and rivals. From diva feuds to brutal industry shade, these 7 musicians found themselves on the wrong side of Aretha's wrath. Ready to hear who she really couldn't stand? Let's get into it. Ray Charles. In the mid-1970s, network executives and music lovers alike buzzed with anticipation. Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles, 2 of the most revered voices in American music, were set to perform a live duet on national television. The atmosphere behind the scenes was charged with excitement. This wasn't just a performance. It was history in the making. During rehearsals, the chemistry between them seemed undeniable. Aretha, always composed and exacting in her artistry, found a surprising ease beside Ray, the free-spirited genius whose piano stylings and soulful vocals had already become legendary. They laughed in between takes, shared road stories, and slid effortlessly into harmony. Producers were elated. What they witnessed in the rehearsal room felt like magic. All signs pointed to a show-stopping performance. But when the cameras began to roll and the stage lights flared, the energy shifted. Ray, ever the improviser, veered from the rehearsed script almost instantly. He stretched out transitions, inserted spontaneous piano riffs, and adjusted the tempo mid-line. To the casual viewer, it might have looked like bold, unrehearsed genius, 2 greats riffing off each other in real time. But for Aretha, who thrived on structure, phrasing, and meticulous timing, it was chaos masked as charm. She tried to keep up, adjusting her vocal cues, improvising harmonies, and following Ray's musical zigzags as best she could. But the performance felt jagged, out of sync. She wasn't rattled, she was offended. Aretha had built her empire on discipline and command. She wasn't just a voice. She was a conductor of the stage, someone who demanded and deserved respect. And Ray, with his impromptu showboating, had violated that. What stung more than the performance itself was what came afterward. Backstage, Ray reportedly laughed with producers, casually remarking, "She's great, but not quick on her feet." It was said with a chuckle, perhaps meant in jest, but to Aretha, it cut deep. It wasn't just a slight. It was a dismissal, a public questioning of her prowess, framed as a light-hearted jab. In her mind, he hadn't just disrupted the music, he had undermined her artistry. From that moment on, the possibility of another collaboration vanished. Aretha never performed with Ray Charles again. No television specials, no tours, not even a spontaneous jam session. And though she never publicly addressed the incident, those close to her recalled her sharp words in private. "He tried to turn a duet into a solo, and me into his punchline." That night became a quiet turning point. While the world continued to celebrate their legacies separately, the chance to see them share a stage again had disappeared. To Aretha, that performance was more than a missed opportunity. It was a breach of trust, a moment when respect, once assumed between equals, was lost under the weight of ego and improvisation. Keith Richards. It was supposed to be a nostalgic celebration, a moment for Keith Richards, the grizzled Rolling Stones guitarist and walking symbol of rock and roll rebellion, to reflect on a lifetime of music. But in a 2007 interview with Rolling Stone, when the conversation veered into the evolution of soul music, Richards delivered a comment that would reverberate far beyond the pages of the magazine. "Soul died with Otis Redding. Aretha's still around, but it's not the same." At first glance, it seemed like a classic Richardsism, brash, blunt, maybe even nostalgic. But for those who had followed Aretha Franklin's career, and especially for Aretha herself, the words landed like a slap. This wasn't just a throwaway quote. This was a slight, a public diminishing of a living legend's continued impact. Otis Redding had died in 1967. In the 40 years since, Aretha had defined, redefined, and elevated soul music time and again. To suggest it had died without her at the center of the conversation wasn't just dismissive, it was erasure. Aretha had known Richards for decades. They'd crossed paths at award shows, festivals, and music industry events. He had seen her triumphs from the front row, the standing ovations, the Grammy sweeps, the Hall of Fame performances. That made the insult sting all the more. It wasn't coming from a stranger. It was coming from a peer, a contemporary who had witnessed her reign and still chose to diminish it. Publicly, Aretha played it cool. In a radio interview shortly after the article's publication, she was asked if she had read Keith's comment. Her reply was swift, sly, and unforgettable. "Some people confuse loud guitars with depth. Bless his heart." The shade was immediate. The line went viral in music circles. It was pure Aretha, grace dipped in gasoline. But those closest to her saw the deeper wound. Privately, Aretha was furious. To her, the comment wasn't just about opinion. It was about legacy, about a woman who had carved out space in a male-dominated industry, who had transcended genres, broken racial barriers, and still had to defend her relevance at every turn. Keith Richards hadn't just questioned her sound, he had questioned her place. From that moment on, Aretha made decisions that reflected her disapproval. Any event where the Rolling Stones were scheduled to appear, she declined. Joint tributes or Hall of Fame galas that included Richards? A firm no. She reportedly asked her team to remove any mention of the Stones from future set lists, tributes, or press materials. When asked privately about Keith in later years, her response was always the same. Silence. The sharpest cut of all. She never shared a stage with the Stones, never agreed to co-headline, never spoke his name publicly again. Because to Aretha, soul music wasn't a fleeting trend or a relic of a bygone era. It was alive, through her, because of her. And legacy? That was sacred ground, not up for debate, not to be redefined by a man who had made his name playing borrowed blues riffs while she had built an empire from the depths of gospel and pain. To her, his comment revealed the truth behind a long history of underestimation, and she responded the only way she knew how, with unwavering pride, precision, and power. Beyonce. At the 2008 Grammy Awards, Beyonce Knowles stood on stage in a shimmering gown, poised and regal, her voice carrying over the crowd as she prepared to introduce one of her idols. "Ladies and gentlemen," she proclaimed with pride, "give it up for the Queen, Tina Turner." The audience roared with excitement, thrilled to see two powerhouse performers united. But as cheers echoed through the Staples Center, another legendary figure watched in stunned silence from afar. Aretha Franklin. To the casual viewer, it was a simple, heartfelt introduction. But to Aretha, a woman who had spent more than 40 years solidifying her place in history as the Queen of Soul, the moment struck a deeply personal chord. It wasn't just the word queen that irked her, it was what it symbolized. Aretha didn't view the title as a throwaway moniker. It was the culmination of a lifetime, forged through gospel beginnings in Detroit churches, cemented by civil rights anthems, and validated through decades of peerless vocal excellence. For her, that crown had been earned, not borrowed, not passed around. So when Beyonce seemingly handed the crown, even momentarily, to Tina Turner, another black icon but from a very different musical lineage, Aretha didn't take it as a harmless show of admiration. She saw it as a slight, a diminishing of her legacy, and she didn't let it slide. Within hours, Aretha released a terse and uncharacteristically pointed public statement. Without directly naming Beyonce, She condemned the remark as a cheap shot and a lapse in respect. The message was crystal clear. The Queen of Soul was not amused. The media buzzed with speculation, and fans were sharply divided. Some shrugged it off as diva drama, a generational misunderstanding between two performers from different eras. Others recognized something deeper. Those close to Aretha understood that her reaction was about more than a title. It was about visibility, recognition, and the hard-won respect she had demanded from an industry that had so often tried to overlook black women. In Aretha's eyes, the comment reflected a dangerous kind of erasure, a younger artist inadvertently rewriting history without acknowledging the shoulders she stood on. From that point forward, Aretha set clear boundaries. She would not attend events where Beyonce headlined. She refused to be photographed beside her. She declined shared billing. In public, she remained civil. But in private, friends recall she could be cutting. "She's a gifted girl," Aretha would say coolly, "who forgot to curtsy." Billy Joel Aretha Franklin had always admired Billy Joel from a distance. She saw in him something rare among modern male artists, a reverence for melody, for lyricism, and for the giants who paved the way. He wasn't just a pop hitmaker. He was, in Aretha's eyes, a true student of musical tradition. He respected the roots, and for that, she respected him. So when the idea of a joint concert began to circulate in the early 2000s, Aretha was intrigued. The concept was elegant and simple. Two legends at the piano, trading songs, celebrating their shared love of classic American music. The producers envisioned a night of cross-genre brilliance. Soul meets pop, gospel meets doo-wop, Motown meets Long Island. It wasn't just a concert. It was supposed to be an event, a cultural moment. Aretha, ever cautious about collaborations, agreed to an initial rehearsal. She wanted to see how the chemistry felt, not just musically, but personally. For Aretha, respect was as important as rhythm. From the start, though, something felt off. Billy Joel was jovial, but not in a way that made her feel truly seen. His attitude struck her as overly casual, even flippant. While Aretha approached the session with quiet intensity, studying sheet music, listening closely to arrangements, Billy cracked jokes and riffed at the piano between takes. She tried to meet him halfway, but the balance never came. The moment that sealed it came during a short break. With a laugh, Billy reportedly turned to her and said, "Come on, Ree. Loosen up. Take a shot of whiskey and lighten the mood." It was meant to be playful, but to Aretha, it landed like an insult. She didn't drink, never had. Her discipline was part of her artistry, every note delivered with clarity, control, and purpose. She had built a career without compromising herself, without softening her edges or dulling her brilliance. And here was a man, someone she had admired, reducing her to a caricature of diva seriousness, as though her commitment to excellence needed to be loosened up. She didn't respond with anger. She didn't raise her voice. Aretha simply stood, gathered her things, and without a word, closed the lid of her piano, hard. The sound echoed through the studio like a final chord. She walked out, never to return. There was no press statement, no public fallout. The joint concert was quietly shelved, left to fade into the background noise of almost moments in music history. But those close to her knew the truth. One friend later recalled her summing it up in a single line. "He plays piano like a poet, but talks like a fool." From that day on, Billy Joel's name vanished from her world. No joint appearances, no awards shows, no tributes, nothing. To the public, it may have seemed like a missed opportunity. But to Aretha, the real concert had never even begun. Because for her, music wasn't just about notes or fame. It was about respect, mutual reverence, shared space. And once that was broken, no melody could put it back together. Detroit. Eminem. Aretha Franklin wasn't just a resident of Detroit. She was Detroit. Her music was born in its gospel churches, nurtured in its smoky jazz lounges, and blasted from the speakers of every record store lining the city's streets. She didn't merely represent the Motor City on the world stage, she embodied it. From Motown's golden age to civil rights marches, Aretha was Detroit's voice, its soul, its enduring pride. And she never forgot where she came from. She gave generously to her community, hosted benefit concerts for local causes, mentored rising talent, and reminded every audience, from London to D.C., that her roots were firmly planted in Detroit's soil. So when another Detroit-born phenomenon exploded onto the scene in the early 2000s, Aretha, like many others, took notice. Eminem, with his rapid-fire delivery and defiant persona, quickly became the face of a new generation. He was loud, raw, controversial, and unmistakably Detroit. Media outlets crowned him the voice of the city's forgotten corners. Fans held him up as proof that talent could rise from anywhere. But for Aretha, the praise came with a pause. As Eminem climbed the charts and released hit after hit, Aretha listened. She heard the nods to Tupac, to Dre, to Nirvana, to Elvis, even to fellow Motor City icons like Kid Rock and Proof. But not once did she hear her name. No sample of her soaring vocals, no lyrical shout-out, not even a passing mention. To most, it seemed like a harmless oversight. But to Aretha, it cut deeper. This wasn't just about ego, it was about history. Aretha had spent her life kicking down doors in an industry that wasn't made for her, a black woman who demanded space, demanded respect, and got it. Her influence extended far beyond soul and R&B. She had paved the way for every artist, black, white, male, female, who came out of Detroit with a dream and something to say. That included Eminem. And yet, in his music, she was invisible. At a private dinner in the late 2000s, someone reportedly brought up Eminem's meteoric rise. Those present recall Aretha leaning back, folding her arms and saying flatly, "He knows who I am. He just chose not to care." There was no raised voice, no bitterness, just a quiet, unmistakable note of disappointment. When asked in later interviews what she thought of Eminem's lyrics, she offered only one word: noise. That was all she said. That was all she needed to say. There was no public feud, no headline-grabbing shade. Aretha was never one to engage in theatrics for attention, but her silence, deliberate, pointed, spoke volumes. Because for Aretha Franklin, giving someone her blessing meant something. It wasn't just approval, it was a legacy being passed forward. And when she withheld it, that meant something too. Luther Vandross. In the early 1980s, Aretha Franklin was eager to reclaim her place at the top of the charts. The musical landscape had shifted, the disco era had faded, and a new wave of R&B was emerging, slick, refined, and radio-ready. Clive Davis, ever the strategist, had a vision. Pair the Queen of Soul with one of the decade's most promising producers, a man whose meticulous style could bring her timeless voice into a modern frame. That man was Luther Vandross. At first glance, it seemed like a dream team. Aretha brought her powerhouse vocals and royal legacy. Luther brought elegance, precision, and a golden touch in the studio. He was already known for transforming vocals into velvet and arrangements into layered masterpieces. Clive hoped Luther's sophistication would complement Aretha's raw brilliance, and in the beginning, it did, for a moment. But as soon as the sessions for Jump To It got underway, creative friction surfaced. Luther's process was deliberate, exacting. He heard music in exact measurements. Phrasing, tempo, breath control. Everything had to align perfectly. Aretha, by contrast, was instinct incarnate. Her gift was not in calculated restraint, but in emotional expression. She didn't sing a line. She lived it. She moved notes around like pieces on a chessboard, following her spirit rather than the sheet music. What began as quiet tension, subtle disagreements, multiple retakes, side comments, soon became a war of wills. Aretha felt micromanaged. Luther, meanwhile, felt she was uncooperative and undisciplined. Each was a master in their own right, but their methods were irreconcilable. The breaking point came late one night in the studio. After hours of takes and mounting frustration, Luther, exasperated, reportedly snapped, "Stop over-singing. Silence." To him, it was a plea for control. To Aretha, it was an insult. She didn't miss a beat. She rose from her seat, looked him dead in the eye, and delivered her response with chilling calm. "Nobody tells the Queen how to reign." Then she walked out, not just from the session, but from any illusion of collaboration. Though Jump to It was ultimately finished, and even went on to become a hit, reaching the top of the R&B charts and returning Aretha to radio prominence, the damage was done. Behind the glossy harmonies and radio-ready polish was a studio riddled with arguments, resentment, and bruised egos. Every chord masked creative tension. Every vocal run disguised another battle for control. Aretha never worked with Luther again. And though she rarely aired grievances publicly, those close to her knew exactly how she felt. In private, she didn't sugarcoat it. He made good music, Benet, but he made it hell to make. To the world, it might have looked like two greats pushing each other to excellence. But to Aretha, it wasn't just about clashing styles. It was about respect. And once she felt that was lost, there was no going back. Dion Warwick. By 2017, Aretha Franklin was in the final chapter of her extraordinary life. Years of illness had taken their toll on the Queen of Soul. She was thin, fragile, and increasingly selective about her appearances. No longer the tireless performer who once brought presidents to tears, Aretha was focused on her health, her legacy, and her peace. But even then, there were lines she refused to let others cross. One of those lines was drawn when a painful reminder surfaced. A comment made 5 years earlier by fellow music legend Dion Warwick during the funeral of Whitney Houston in 2012. At the time, Warwick had taken the podium and told mourners that Aretha was expected to perform but hadn't shown up. The crowd murmured. Cameras rolled. It seemed like a minor note in a deeply emotional day. But for Aretha, watching from home in physical and emotional anguish, it was anything but minor. The truth, rarely reported in detail, was that Aretha had been in no condition to attend. Her feet were so swollen from illness that she couldn't wear shoes. She was devastated by Whitney's passing. Whitney wasn't just a talent, she was family. Aretha had known her since she was a child, the daughter of her dear friend, Cissy Houston. The grief, combined with her physical state, had made the prospect of attending unbearable. Yet instead of privacy and compassion, Dion's comment felt like public shame. Aretha didn't respond then. She remained silent for years, allowing the moment to pass. But she didn't forget. In 2017, seemingly out of nowhere, she released something she almost never did. A public letter to the Associated Press. 5 pages, single-spaced. And she didn't mince words. She accused Dion of blatant lies, of using Whitney's funeral as a stage not for mourning, but for unnecessary gossip. She said the comment was damaging, deeply disrespectful, and factually untrue. The tone was sharp but elegant, a masterclass in indignation dressed in grace. The media erupted. Headlines blared, "Aretha slams Dion." "Queen of Soul breaks silence on long-standing feud." And in the middle of the storm was one chilling line at the letter's end. "Dion knows what she did." No elaboration. No further interviews. Just a sentence that said everything. To fans and insiders alike, this was no spontaneous flare-up. The Aretha-Dion feud had smoldered quietly for decades. There had been chilly run-ins at music tributes, side eyes backstage at award shows, and unspoken rivalries between their respective camps. Both were towering figures from the golden age of soul, both deeply proud, and both known to carry grudges like heirlooms. But this time, Aretha had decided she'd had enough. After the letter, the feud was never addressed again. Aretha stopped acknowledging Dion in any professional setting. The coldness wasn't theatrical. It was deliberate. The Queen had spoken her truth, and in her eyes, the matter was closed. Not forgiven, not forgotten, simply finished. What do you think of the 7 musicians Aretha Franklin hated? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.